You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hello, Jack.
Wow, you guys are really organized, I have to say. I'm very impressed. Oh, Gene, it's good to hear your voice.
I'm here. Hold on a minute.
It's good to hear your voice.
Hey, Jack, how you doing, guy?
Wow, Wally, it's good to see your face, my man.
Hi, Wally.
Oh. Hi, Len.
Well, Gene, thank you for setting this up, Gene. You both are my mentors on Healthy 100 Years. And I thought we should spend a few minutes talking about what the next generation of Stanford medical doctors should be thinking about in their quest, and maybe all medical doctors and medical students in their quest to have a healthy 100 years, because both of you are in your 90s and both of you are still healthy and both of you are still living at home.
Exactly right. We're warming up to the test.
Well, seriously, you both have become, in my mind, the model of healthy aging, because as you know, I've watched my brother die. I've watched my mother diminish and die, or, you know, basically come to end of life. I think it was sort of natural. And now Lee's mom is at end of life as well, is immobile, bedridden, basically 7/24 nursing full time. And it's not a very healthy way. She's just about your age. I want to say she's like 92.
How is she cognitively?
Yeah, cognitively, she's still present. Cognitively, she can watch TV, but she does have a lot of pain. So there's a lot of medication. And so she drifts in and out of sleep a lot. But in general, both of you, I think, have really managed your lives in a way that is amazing, and is in a way that's worthy of a discussion of how you think about what you've done, because you're both still living in your family, your homes, your family homes, and pretty much on your own, right? Both of you, to some degree.
I'm writing a book, Jack, called Aging is Negotiable.
Right. And that's
Do
a
you
good
agree with that premise? I
agree with it. I phrase it as a question: is aging negotiable? And then how negotiable is it? Because at some point, we all start to lose our capabilities. Like I notice just in my own functioning, I'm still in my 60s, but I notice that things that I was able to do in my 40s, like swim nonstop for 90 minutes, I just can't go for 90 minutes. I can go maybe 60 minutes nonstop. But you get into beyond 60 minutes, and years ago, I could go nonstop for 90 minutes. And I know you did a paper, Wally, years ago that talked about the normal diminishment of physical activity over
7% per year versus 2% per year.
Right,
Those are my metrics.
Like, how negotiable is that curve of diminishment over time?
0.5% versus 2% is negotiable. That's a decision.
It's not negotiable to 0%, right?
Right.
It's not negotiable. Like, there's no way to imagine, even with the best minds at Calico and other startups that Google and others are suggesting, that somehow we're going to have infinite life and people are going to live to 190 or 200 or 250. I mean, that's just a fool's errand to imagine that it's negotiable to that extent, right?
I have a different view, although I'm sure Wally will agree with me that there is no negotiating with the second law of thermodynamics, so that
Aging is entropy.
so you cannot negotiate with the aging, the fundamental aging process. What you can negotiate with are longevity determinants. That is, you can negotiate with your lifestyle and every aspect of living to exclude causes of death like cardiovascular disease, cancer perhaps, by exercising, by all of the rules of nutrition that we know about. So that aspect is negotiable. And there are examples in biology worldwide of this happening. For example, there are fish of the same species that live longer in those members who live in equatorial waters compared to the same species living in very cold waters, where the ones living in cold waters are living longer. There are many, many examples in biology of the manipulatability, if that's a word,
Right.
of longevity, but not of the fundamental aging process. They're two different phenomena. And I think Wally will agree with me about that.
Right. The negotiation is on things like don't smoke, don't overeat, don't use sugar,
all
no
of
salt.
the things that Wally has emphasized are negotiable, and he has negotiated successfully with most, or if not all of them.
Well, you'd also include no alcohol, right? Zero alcohol.
No, that's not true, Jeff.
No, there are definitely people out there that think somehow alcohol is a real killer, right?
Well, I do not touch alcohol, not because I believe that it is harmful, and I agree with Wally that it is a delight for many people who do it in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
But I simply don't like the taste. Is that understandable? I'd rather have a milkshake. That I can taste. But alcohol, I don't like. It's like medicine for me. So the fact that I avoid alcohol is not because I have anything against it specifically or health-wise. I just don't like it. Is that understandable?
Right. I think there are people that are whiskey lovers and cigar lovers, and they combine the whiskey with the cigar, and it never was my cup of tea. But there are definitely people out there that go to cigar bars and whiskey bars, and they combine the two, and those would probably be considered things that you shouldn't even consider. Although I know one of the speakers that Stanford has had in the lifestyle course suggested that maybe that jolt to your system that a shot of whiskey or a cigar puff gives you somehow jolts it in a way that's helpful as opposed to harmful.
There's one critical observation I think that's very important here, and I know Wally will agree with me. Centenarians and supercentenarians do not so far have a common denominator that implies their success in living so long, so that many of them are indeed smokers. We know of several centenarians and maybe supercentenarians, I don't remember the data now, who are lifelong smokers. So you can't find one or even more than one life activity or lack of activity that provides an excellent opportunity to reach 100.
There's no real magic bullet, I guess is what you would say.
No, I think Wally will agree with me about that.
Do you believe in Brownian movement?
Yes, of course.
Is that the cause of aging?
No, Brownian motion is the result of the second law of energy dissipation at the molecular level.
Right. Is that the cause of aging?
No, I don't believe it's a cause of aging. Do you?
I think aging is entropy, which is the Brownian movement. Is it that Brownian movement?
Well, Brownian movement is at the
molecular level.
Well, not even below molecular level. It's more or less at the atomic level. atoms are in constant motion. Electrons in their orbits are in constant motion, and that motion allows for energy dissipation, hence Brownian movement.
So let me put some data up on the screen for you because I wanted to get your reaction to this. This is the Wikipedia entry from today of a supercentenarian list, the 50 oldest living people. Obviously, maybe someone died last night, but this page is updated regularly. And the 50 oldest people, you'll notice a pattern. I'm sure you see it instantly, which is at least the top 20 are all females. So the oldest person is a female in Japan, born January 2, presumably this is double check data, 1903, going on 100, over 119 years old, going on 120. Next one is a female in France. I mean, the geography doesn't seem to matter, although Japan would seem to have more people than given its population. And if we keep going down, you'll see female. And then finally, number 32 in Venezuela is a gentleman named Juan Vicente Perez Mora, who's going on 113 years old. He's 112 and 275 days. I presume this gets updated daily as each day clicks off. From Venezuela. These are the top 50 people. And I guess when you get to the bottom of 50, and there's a lot from Japan, relatively speaking.
This is not accurate information.
Okay, tell me why.
The only accurate information on this subject that I'm aware of is the Gerontology Research Center data out of UCLA, which you can also bring up on your screen. But
okay,
this Wikipedia information provides no specific data on how they establish with absolute accuracy the birthdays of these people, especially in Japan. It was revealed several years ago that the Japanese system of maintaining birth dates was faulty, and many of the very old Japanese were not as old as they claimed they were. And that has since been modified. I don't know when this table is supposed to be accurate as of today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's updated monthly or so. It's not updated instantaneously.
Yeah, okay, but could you bring up the Gerontology Research Center?
Yeah, I'm going to do it, but let me just read this and get your reaction.
So I have no confidence in this because there is no statement as to how the accuracy of birthdays were established as they have been done rigorously by the GRC.
Right. So do you think this is probably inflated or overstated?
It's inaccurate. I don't know whether it's over or understated, probably overstated, but I can't prove it because they don't give any details on how these dates were established. There's a long history of this exaggerated age.
Right. They have some footnotes. Bring up a footnote from a list called the Gerontology Research Group. I'll bring up that now just so we could see how that compares. But they're saying, Wally and Len, they're saying that there's basically less than 1,000 total people worldwide that have made it to 110. So this is a gerontology research group. I don't know if this is the UCLA group or not. It's at
Well, it's not. I can tell you it's not.
It's not?
No, that's better.
This is saying numbers of living supercentenarians as of the last update. The last update was February 22nd, I think, according to this. It says 14 females, so this is a much lower number, right? Validated living supercentenarians, average age 115. And it has the same person from Japan at the top, Kana Tanaka. That's the same person, same date, right?
That's understandable that there are 2, 3, 5 that appear on both lists. But this, of all of the lists that I'm aware of, there are only 2 or 3. This one is, in my judgment, the most accurate because I know the extents to which they go. to determine the accuracy of the date of birth.
Right. And presumably it's getting better over time in the sense that 100 years ago, records were not kept as well as they are kept today, right?
We didn't have birth certificates in Texas in the late 1920s.
Right, right. So there's definitely some improvement over time, but I'm curious about the level of females. It's clear that females outlive males generally, right? Can we agree to that?
Only in the 20th century and the 21st century, not in the 19th century. But when female mortality during childbirth was very high, and consequently the reverse situation existed.
Right. So do you think that there's something to what you were just discussing about Brownian motion and entropy, that females seem to manage that process of, deterioration, second law of thermodynamics, whatever you want to call the entropy that's occurring over time? They just manage it better. They have a better set of physics applied to their bodies, even if they've given birth to children. That's the other question I had, which is, does bringing children into the world actually increase or decrease your lifespan? Of course, this says nothing about health span, which might be quite different than lifespan, right?
Well, I don't think that the laws of physics distinguish between males and females to begin with.
Is that right? But why are females doing better, according to this chart? What do you think, Wally?
Well, we fundamentally don't know the answer to that, but it is, you can make all of the speculations that you want about why that happens. Of what significance would that be?
Well, I think it might suggest that the female form is the stronger physical form for the human body.
Well, so we will accept that, but we don't know the reasons for it.
Right. We don't know. We don't know what actually is the mechanism that underlies it. But going back to the two of you.
But it's also important to point out that other than in humans, that situation is reversed in many species. So there's no constant difference that you observe in humans that is maintained throughout living forms.
Right, because you would say, if it's true that females generically somehow are the stronger gender, why are we not seeing that in rats? Why are we not seeing that in horses? Why are we not seeing that in dogs, right?
Well, it even defies the fact, and it is a fact, that big dogs live longer than small dogs.
Right.
And that's never been explained.
Right. So let's go now to the two of you, because you're both in your 90s. You're both able to, I think you're both driving, right? I was going to ask you, because that is actually something that does cause death. And I ride a bicycle a lot, so I know these cars swoosh by, and of course the drivers could be texting and doing stuff. But Wally, you're still driving your car, right? You got that little Miata sports car, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're still driving, right? You haven't given up your car yet, right?
Never.
No, but that's a big event in the aging process as you move to becoming, both of you becoming supercentenarians, which maybe you're on the track to becoming supercentenarians, which means each of you has maybe another 20 plus years to live, which probably you would say, yeah, that's optimistic given this data that there's only 14 living supercentenarians as of the last update, not the 50 that the Wikipedia is reporting, but just 14 out of what, 8 billion people or 10 billion people, if we really had a true count. But giving up a car is a big deal, right? Because it's a form of autonomy that you have. You both have your own cars. You've had them probably for the last, 60, 70 years? Think back to when you first got your respective licenses. That was probably over 70 years ago, right? When you were teenagers, right? and you've been driving ever since, right?
Yes.
And you've probably owned a car for most of that period of time. Not the same car, but some vehicle, right?
Yeah, sure.
And
Yes.
and that's a big issue, right? I mean, sort of like I want to click down the issues that we all face as we get older. One of them is when do you give up the autonomy of driving? Because I think the Department of Motor Vehicles will renew your license so long as you can pass a vision test. They don't test how quickly you can press on the brakes.
Well, how many of these super centenarians that are listed here still drive?
Well, I can tell you my mom stopped driving when she was about, she lived to 91. My dad lived to 90. My dad continued to drive almost right up to the end. My mom gave up driving about when she was about 85. She said, I don't think I'm alert enough to drive anymore. And she had the convenience of having my brother drive her. And of course, we these days have the convenience, if you have a smartphone, which I'm sure both of you do, to call an Uber, to call a Lyft, to call some form of taxi service on your smartphone. But Wally, you talk about this in your book.
Did you say that we both have smartphones?
Oh, you have some ability to on your computer or otherwise, right?
I never have owned a smartphone.
Oh, okay. So that's interesting. You're one
And
of the
I have never been a member of any social media.
Well, that probably is a life-enhancing thing right there. But Wally, you wrote about this in your book. I think it was the book that was Live Too Short, Die Too Long, right? Didn't you write about the big decisions that all of us have to make as the aging process occurs? And one of them is driving. And when do you give up the keys? And how do you give up the keys and so on? Am I remembering that chapter correctly or not?
I don't recall that specifically, Jack. How about Madame Calment? How long was she ambulating? I think she broke her hip at age 112 or something.
Right. And that's usually sort of a kiss of death, right? To have a hip fracture or
fracture is a common cause of death.
Right. It's a common cause of death in your home, slipping and falling and breaking something and then becoming completely immobile, right?
Don't fall down is a major urgency.
Right, which of course means you have to take steps, as I've been doing. I don't know if you guys remember, but I've been doing a lot of yoga lately with the view of trying to become more flexible over time. And I have to tell you, I have gained some flexibility as a result of the yoga, because it does force you to sort of maneuver your body in a way that I'll just show you on the screen. That's me on the yoga mat. Do you see me there on the yoga mat?
Yeah, but it doesn't do anything for me.
That picture doesn't do anything for you?
No.
Well, you see, I have a smile on my face at least, right? But in general, I do think that people have to plan for the potential of immobility. That's one of the learnings I've received over the last couple of years of this COVID pandemic, and watching my brother and then my mother die. They both became immobile, and they both pretty much lost the will to live because they were immobile. Like, as a result of the immobility, they felt like they had lost their autonomy. They weren't driving anymore. They weren't getting out of bed anymore. They weren't doing things. They weren't making stuff happen. They lost their capability to feel like they were in control of their life. And I think having a car and being able to drive a car and being able to walk to your car to get in your car to drive the car and park it and all the jazz that you have to do to get from point A to point B, that's a big part of a sense of control, right? that you have over your life, right? That you can get in your car and go get a sandwich or do something without having to do, fuss about it, right? That's why people have cars in their garages and the ability to move around. But I'm kind of curious, Wally, how do you think about that whole topic of when do you give up driving? Do you just know the time has come, or do you wait for an accident to happen?
Both Leonard and I keep looking for ultimate markers.
Right.
And driving is almost one of them. But somebody wrote a paper, said that the two things that life depends on is metabolism and reproduction.
Right.
So as long as we keep metabolizing, and movement is essential for metabolism, I think.
Right. So you would say if you're breathing and you're moving and you're drinking water and taking in nutrition, then metabolism is happening and the mitochondria are operating to some degree. But over time,
I don't think there is a departure from when you stop metabolizing. That you do that until you die.
Right, but you do it at a different level of velocity or a different acceleration, or both acceleration and velocity, right?
That's how much you use oxygen.
Right.
As long as we keep using oxygen, then we're still alive.
Right. But at some point, you decide it's too risky. Maybe you have a close call. I mean, I'll get off this whole question of a car, but the symbolism of losing the keys to the car is a pretty big symbolic event as one ages, right?
Of course it is. Mobility and life are synonymous.
Right. So to some degree, it's a little bit like the question of when do you decide to retire from your job or your profession or your employment or your business or whatever your life has been about. Now, I don't think either one of you have actually retired. I think each of you still do a lot of intellectual work, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
You're not teaching regularly anymore, Leonard, but you do give lectures. And
I'm scheduled to give a lecture to a class of students in Singapore next week.
Right. So you're going to do it over Zoom, or are you flying to Singapore?
The former.
Okay. So you do it over Zoom. It's convenient. You don't have to go through a million different iterations to get to the airport, get on the plane, get through security. I mean, it's such a intense process these days. It's convenient.
The only thing I have had to give up is my wet lab research work.
Right. Well, when did that happen? When you had to give it up, or you chose to give it up, or both?
Well, other people chose to give it up for me.
Okay. What does that mean? The grant stopped?
No. It means that space was offered to me that was unacceptable. Conditions were unacceptable. And the politics were unacceptable.
Right. So,
which was the most important variable.
Right. So big universities, you could argue, discriminate against older professors, right? Just like...
I don't know. Maybe Wally does. But I don't know of a single academic who I was friendly with who retired or left academia under happy circumstances.
Yeah, you're saying there's a process of pushing people out that happens over time.
Yeah. In general, yes. There are probably a few exceptions. But
right. I mean, I think that happens in law firms. I think that happens in other professional service firms as older people, the younger people want to make room. They want to get the corner office. They want to get the resource. They want to get the secretaries. You know, that's just like the competition for scarce resources. And I can tell you there are some lawyers and other professionals I know that they choose their moment of, hey, I don't think things are going to get better than winning this case or winning this client or closing this deal or whatever. Now's the time to just celebrate and leave. Like they do it at their high point. They say, it's not going to get better than this, so it's time to move on.
One of my heroes at Stanford was John Gardner.
Right.
and John Gardner lost appointments gradually because of Stanford politics. And that hurt
Exactly.
him, and I'm sure allowed him to die.
Oh, you're
You know
saying
John Gardner, Glenn?
Well, I'm not familiar with that situation, but it's yet another of probably thousands of examples of that occurrence, that kind of occurrence.
right. So over time, as even tenured professors are viewed as, quote, less productive or less responsive or less whatever, like big law firms have the same problem or same issue.
They don't have to fire them. They just, if they're laboratory workers, they reduce the laboratory space to the size of a phone booth.
Right. And they send the message that way. And I have to tell you, just as a comparison, in England, lawyers in England typically only work to about age 50. So it's like a 25-year career, because by the time you're done with school, you're already 25. And their view is we don't want really ancient lawyers in our firms. So the big firms, they actually have a plan of exiting people and maneuvering them out to make room for the younger people. Now, I always thought a career as a lawyer.
That is inconsistent with the fact that all of the UK lawyers, as I understand it, have to wear gray hair and curls to make them look old.
In the barrister, in being a barrister, and there might be an exception if you're an exceptional barrister that you can be a bit older than age 50. Maybe it's 55. It'd be an interesting.
Why do they wear those wigs?
Because it's a tradition and ritual.
But it's a tradition because they want to look older.
They want to look wise. Yeah, they want to look older and wiser. Yeah, it's true. It's like the gray hair produces a certain amount of wisdom, right? But that's a related question that I have, which is, at what point did you start thinking about exiting? I understand that your lab resource got eliminated or reduced, but you must have started thinking at some point about maybe it's time to stop the daily grind, right? The daily grind being seeing patients, in Molly's case, seeing students, in your case, in my case, would be seeing clients. When did you start thinking about, sort of along the lines of, this is not necessary anymore. I've got enough money. I should have more freedom of my time, right?
Well, I can't really remember that occurring, but what I do remember, and what has been the subject of several articles, is the time in your life. Let's start, of course, with youth, when you're always planning ahead, or mostly planning ahead, what's going to happen in the future, where will you be in the future. And then there comes a point in your life when that gets reversed, and you start thinking about the past more than you think about the future. That the future becomes less and less long, or less and less, or time in which potential is decreased. And that I don't know whether you two fellows have experienced that yet, in your case, Jack, but I can tell you that there have been many articles written about that concept.
That the way you look at time is different as you age.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
As you
Let
age.
me ask you that question. Do you look more toward the future than you do toward the past?
I have seen a bit of look, particularly now that all these smartphones capture photos, and they actually dish the photos back to you on a regular basis. So like today, I got a bunch of photos that were from 5 years ago on the same date, February 25th, but 5 years ago. So obviously pre-pandemic, different period of time. Where was I? I think I was actually teaching, just as a small footnote, teaching classes in Moscow. to a law school in Moscow. Like, I had a visa that actually is still good for 5 years to be able to go to Moscow.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this episode of The Valley Current.